Michelle Johnson glanced at her watch and let out a small gasp. It was already 5:45 p.m. and Sweet Delight's Bakery closed at 6. She had exactly 15 minutes to get there before they locked their doors for the evening. After a long day of teaching third graders, the last thing she wanted was to battle rush hour traffic, but today was special. It was her 5th wedding anniversary with Derek, and she wanted everything to be perfect. She quickly gathered her things from her classroom desk, stuffing ungraded papers into her tote bag. She'd have to finish those tomorrow. Right now, the cake was the priority. Not just any cake, but Derek's favorite, a 3-layer red velvet with cream cheese frosting. The same flavor they'd had at their wedding. Leaving early today? Asked Tricia, the 4th grade teacher from across the hall who poked her head into Michelle's classroom. Anniversary, Michelle replied with a smile, slinging her bag over her shoulder. 5 years? Already? Wow, time flies. Got anything special planned? Michelle nodded as she switched off the classroom lights. Dinner at home. I'm making his favorite pasta. And I need to pick up the cake I ordered before the bakery closes. Well, have fun. Tell that husband of yours I said hello. Tricia called as Michelle hurried down the hallway, her sensible teaching flat squeaking against the recently polished floor. The drive to Sweet Delight's took longer than expected. A minor fender bender had traffic backed up for several blocks, and by the time Michelle pulled into the bakery parking lot, her watch showed 5:57 p.m. She practically jumped out of her car, her heart racing not from exertion but from the fear that she might miss the closing time. The bell above the door jingled as she rushed in, slightly out of breath. The comforting smells of sugar, butter, and vanilla immediately wrapped around her like a warm blanket. A young man was already turning the sign to closed, but he smiled when he saw her. Just made it, he said, flipping the sign back. What can I help you with? I have a cake on hold, Michelle explained, her words coming out in a rush. Under Johnson. It's a red velvet. The young man nodded and disappeared into the back. Michelle took a moment to catch her breath, looking around at the nearly empty display cases. End-of-day pastries sat looking a little lonely, waiting for tomorrow's fresh batch to join them. The bakery had that quiet, winding-down feel of a place ready to rest after a busy day. After a minute, the young man returned carrying a white box tied with a simple red ribbon. Here you go, Mrs. Johnson, 1 red velvet cake. Michelle's face lit up as she took the box. It was heavier than she expected, which was a good sign. It meant they hadn't skimped on the layers or the frosting. Thank you so much, and thank you for waiting for me. No problem. That'll be $48.50. Michelle nodded and reached for her wallet. The bakery was upscale, one of those places where people came from across town for special occasions. The prices reflected that, but Derek was worth every penny. She rummaged through her purse, pushing aside tissues, pens, and the various odds and ends that somehow always accumulated there. Her phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Heading home soon. Can't wait to see you. Michelle smiled and typed a quick reply with one hand while still searching for her wallet with the other. She finally found it tucked in an inside pocket and pulled out her credit card. The cashier reached for it just as another customer walked in, asking if they were still open. While the young man explained they were closing but could help with a quick purchase, Michelle glanced at her watch again. She still needed to stop at the grocery store for fresh basil for the pasta sauce. Her mind raced ahead to her evening plans. She'd need at least an hour to prepare dinner, and she wanted time to change into the new dress she'd bought for the occasion. The cashier turned back to her, but another employee called him from the kitchen about a phone call. Just a sec, he said apologetically, stepping away from the counter. Michelle stood there, credit card in hand, mentally going through her to-do list. She needed to pick up that basil, start the pasta sauce, chill the wine, set the table with their good dishes, and somehow find time to do something with her hair that had gone flat during the school day. Her phone buzzed again. It was the grocery store app notification reminding her of items on her list. She put her credit card back in her wallet to free up her hands so she could check the notification. At that moment, the bakery phone rang, and the young cashier who had returned looked torn between answering it and finishing Michelle's transaction. The phone kept ringing insistently. You can get that, Michelle said with a kind smile. I'm in no rush. She was, actually, but she didn't want to be rude. The cashier gave her a grateful look and picked up the phone. Michelle glanced at her grocery list, mentally adding a few more items. Maybe she should get some candles, too. and Derek's favorite ice cream to go with the cake. The call seemed to be taking longer than expected. Michelle glanced at the clock on the wall. 6:08 p.m. The grocery store closed at 9, so she still had plenty of time, but she wanted everything to be perfect for tonight. Finally, the cashier hung up. "Sorry about that," he said, looking a bit flustered. "Friday evenings are always busy with last-minute weekend orders." He handed her the cake box, which she'd set on the counter. "Have a great anniversary." Michelle thanked him, tucked the box carefully under her arm, and headed for the door, already thinking about her next stop. The cake felt secure in its box, the weight of it reassuring against her side. Derek would be so surprised. He thought they were just doing a simple dinner at home. He had no idea about the cake or the gift she'd hidden in her closet. A vintage watch she'd found at an antique shop that matched his grandfather's old pocket watch. The bell jingled again as she left, stepping into the warm evening air. The sky was painted in soft oranges and pinks as the sun began its descent. It was going to be a beautiful night. 5 years of marriage had their ups and downs, but moments like these, planning surprises, creating special memories, these were the threads that wove their life together. As Michelle carefully placed the cake box on the passenger seat of her car, she never noticed the young cashier running out of the bakery, waving his arms to catch her attention. By the time he reached the parking lot, her car was already pulling away. The grocery store was less crowded than Michelle expected for a Friday evening. She quickly found the fresh basil, picked up some cherry tomatoes that looked particularly ripe, and splurged on a fancy bottle of olive oil. In the wine section, she selected Derek's favorite red, a moderately priced Cabernet that they'd discovered on their honeymoon. As she passed the floral department, she impulsively added a small bouquet of mixed flowers to her cart. Throughout the store, her mind kept returning to the cake, sitting in her car. She hoped it wouldn't get too warm while she shopped. The spring evening was mild, but cream cheese frosting could be temperamental. Back at home, Michelle juggled her bags in the cake box as she unlocked the front door. Their cat, Pepper, greeted her with enthusiastic figure eights around her ankles, nearly tripping her as she made her way to the kitchen. "Not now. Pepper," she laughed, carefully setting the cake box on the counter. "I've got important anniversary business to attend to." She quickly put away the groceries and checked the time, 6:45 p.m. Derek usually got home around 7:30, which gave her just enough time to start dinner and get changed. She pulled out pots and pans, her movements efficient from years of cooking in this kitchen. The pasta sauce began to simmer, filling the house with rich, garlicky aromas. With dinner preparations underway, Michelle hurried to their bedroom to change. The new dress was hanging in her closet, still in its store bag. She pulled it out, a deep blue wrap dress that Derek once said matched her eyes. She hadn't worn it yet, saving it for tonight. She quickly showered, did her best with her hair, and applied a touch of makeup. When she returned to the kitchen, the sauce was bubbling nicely. She turned it down to low, set the table with their wedding china, and arranged the flowers in a small vase as a centerpiece. Everything was coming together perfectly. Finally, she opened the cake box to take a peek. The red velvet layers looked moist and perfect. The cream cheese frosting applied in elegant swirls. The bakery had added a small chocolate plaque that read, "Happy Anniversary" in delicate script. It was beautiful. As she closed the box, her eye caught something, or rather the absence of something. There was no receipt attached to the box. She frowned slightly, trying to remember if she'd been given one. With all the rushing and the phone call interruption at the bakery, had she actually paid for the cake? Michelle bit her lip, trying to recall the exact sequence of events. She remembered taking out her credit card, then putting it back when she checked her phone. But had the transaction gone through? She couldn't remember the cashier running her card or her signing anything. The sound of keys in the front door interrupted her thoughts. Derek was home. "Something smells amazing," his voice called from the entryway. Michelle quickly closed the cake box and slid it to the side of the counter. She'd figure out the payment issue tomorrow. Tonight was about celebrating their love. "Happy anniversary," she said, meeting him with a kiss as he walked into the kitchen. Derek's face broke into a wide smile as he took in the scene. The set table, the flowers, Michelle in her new dress. Michelle's smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure," she said, trying to recall the exact sequence of events at the bakery. It was really hectic when I was checking out. The bakery was closing, the cashier got a phone call, and I was in such a rush. Derek closed the cake box and set it back on the counter. His expression had changed, a small crease appearing between his eyebrows. "So did you pay for it or not?" "I must have," Michelle said, turning back to the boiling water and adding the pasta. She stirred it once, watching the rigid strands soften in the bubbling water. I had my card out. I was standing at the register. "But you don't actually remember paying?" Derek pressed, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. Michelle shook her head slowly. "I don't remember the specific moment, no, but I wouldn't have just walked out without paying." She tried to laugh it off. "I'm not a cake thief." Derek didn't laugh. Instead, he picked up the cake box again and examined it, as if looking for some hidden proof of purchase. "This is a fancy bakery. This cake probably cost, what, $50? $48.50? Michelle corrected automatically, then immediately regretted it. The price confirmed she'd been told the total, but not necessarily that she'd paid it. "So you remember the price but not paying?" Derek's voice had an edge to it now. Michelle set down the wooden spoon a bit harder than necessary. "I had a crazy day, Derek. I rushed to the bakery right after work, and then I still had to get groceries and make dinner and get ready. It was hectic. I'm sure I paid. The cashier would have stopped me if I hadn't." "Unless he was distracted by that phone call you mentioned," Derek countered. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture Michelle recognized as a sign of his growing frustration. "You need to call them tomorrow and check." "Of course I will," Michelle agreed, eager to move past this conversation. "It's probably just a mix-up. But tonight is our anniversary. Can we not worry about it right now?" Derek seemed ready to say something else, but stopped himself. After a moment, he nodded. "You're right. It's our night." He stepped forward and kissed her cheek. "Dinner smells amazing." Michelle relaxed slightly, hopeful that they had moved past the issue. She drained the pasta and began plating their dinner while Derek poured the wine she'd bought. The normalcy of these movements was comforting. They'd done this dance hundreds of times over their 5 years of marriage, moving around each other in the kitchen with practiced ease. They sat down at the table, the soft glow of candles reflecting in their wedding china. Michelle raised her glass. "To 5 years," she said with a smile. "And many more to come." Derek clinked his glass against hers. "5 years," he echoed, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. For a few minutes they ate in silence. Michelle complimented the pasta, though she'd made it herself. Derek nodded, taking another bite. The tension that had briefly dissipated was slowly creeping back in, like a fog rolling over their carefully set table. "The thing is," Derek finally said, setting down his fork, "this isn't the first time." Michelle looked up from her plate. "What do you mean?" "The forgetting to pay thing," he clarified. "Remember that time at the hardware store when you walked out with the paint samples? Or at the coffee shop when you were on the phone?" Michelle felt her cheeks warm. "Those were honest mistakes. I went back and paid both times as soon as I realized." "And what about the electric bill last month?" "That wasn't the same thing at all," Michelle protested. "Their website was down. I couldn't pay it online." "But you forgot to try again later," Derek pointed out. "We got a late notice." Michelle set down her fork. The pasta that had tasted so good a minute ago now seemed flavorless. "Why are you bringing all this up now?" "It's our anniversary." Derek sighed, running a hand over his face. "I'm just saying there's a pattern, Michelle. You get distracted, you forget things, and then we have to deal with the consequences." "We?" Michelle echoed. "I'm the one who went back and paid. I'm the one who called the electric company and explained. When have you ever had to deal with the consequences?" "I worry about it," Derek said. "I worry about what it says about us, about our finances." Michelle stared at him. "What it says about us?" "Derek? There's simple mistakes that anyone could make, and our finances are fine. We're both employed. We pay our bills, usually on time," she added before he could interject. "And we have savings. What exactly are you worried about?" Derek took a sip of his wine, his eyes not meeting hers. "My parents always said you can tell a lot about a person by how they handle money." The statement hung in the air between them. Michelle felt as if the temperature in the room had dropped several degrees. "And what does that mean?" she asked, her voice quiet. Derek shrugged, but it wasn't a casual gesture, just that they raised me to be responsible, to always pay my debts, to be careful. "And you think I'm not careful, not responsible?" Michelle could hear the hurt in her own voice. "Because of a few honest mistakes?" They add up, Derek said, and it makes me wonder what else adds up that I don't know about. Michelle pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. What are you really saying, Derek? Do you think I'm lying about the cake? Do you think I deliberately walked out without paying? I don't know, Derek admitted. But it wouldn't be the first time someone in your family had money troubles. The words hit Michelle like a physical blow. My family? What does my family have to do with this? Your brother's bankruptcy, Derek said, as if it were obvious. Your dad's gambling before he got help. These things run in families sometimes. Michelle stood up so quickly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I can't believe you just said that. My brother lost everything in a divorce that wasn't his fault. And my dad has been clean for 15 years. How dare you throw that in my face? Derek remained seated, looking up at her with a maddeningly calm expression. I'm just stating facts, Michelle. Your family has a history with money problems, and now you're forgetting to pay for things. It's concerning. You know what's concerning. Michelle's voice was shaking now. The way you're acting right now. The things you're implying. On our anniversary of all nights. I didn't want to bring this up tonight, Derek said. But when I saw that missing receipt, you decided to accuse me of being a thief? Michelle finished for him. Of being what? Genetically predisposed to financial irresponsibility because of my family? Derek finally stood, matching her height. I didn't say that. You didn't have to, Michelle retorted. It was pretty clear what you meant. They stood facing each other across the table, the candles still flickering between them, casting dancing shadows on their faces. The romantic dinner Michelle had planned so carefully was ruined. The evening that was supposed to celebrate their love had turned into this. I think we need to cool down, Derek said after a moment. This is getting out of hand. Out of hand? Michelle repeated. You've basically called me a thief and brought up my family's past struggles to prove your point. I think out of hand is an understatement. Derek sighed heavily. Look, I just want us to be on the same page financially. Is that so wrong? My parents taught me. I know what your parents taught you, Michelle cut in. I've heard it a million times. The Johnsons always pay their debts. The Johnsons are always responsible with money. The Johnsons never make mistakes. She picked up her wine glass and took a long sip. Well, I'm a Johnson too, Derek. I have been for 5 years. But sometimes it feels like you're still waiting for me to earn the name. Derek's expression softened slightly. That's not fair, Michelle, isn't it? She challenged. Then why bring up my family? Why not just ask me about the cake without all the accusations? I did ask, Derek defended himself. But you couldn't even remember if you'd paid or not. That's what worries me. Michelle shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her. What worries me is that after 5 years of marriage, you still don't trust me. This isn't about trust, Derek insisted. It's about responsibility. If you trusted me, Michelle continued as if he hadn't spoken, you'd know that if I did accidentally walk out without paying, I'd fix it first thing tomorrow. You wouldn't immediately jump to thinking the worst of me. Derek didn't respond right away. He picked up his napkin from the floor where it had fallen during their argument and placed it carefully beside his plate. Maybe we should just finish dinner, he said finally. Talk about something else. How can we just move on? Michelle asked. You've made it clear what you think of me. I don't think anything bad about you, Michelle, Derek said, his voice softer now. I love you. I'm just concerned. Michelle sat back down, more from exhaustion than agreement. Fine. Let's just eat. They resumed their meal in uncomfortable silence. The pasta had gone cold. The candles had burned lower. Outside, the sky had darkened completely, and through the window Michelle could see stars appearing one by one. She had imagined this night so differently. Laughter, reminiscing about their wedding day, perhaps even dancing in the living room like they used to. Instead, they ate without speaking. The only sounds the occasional clink of silverware against china and the tick of the clock on the wall. When they finished, Derek stood to clear the plates. Should we have some cake? He asked, an olive branch of sorts. Michelle looked at the white box on the counter, the simple red ribbon now seeming like a mockery of the celebration they'd failed to have. Michelle stared at the small slip of paper in Derek's hand. The receipt. It had been there all along, stuck to the bottom of the box. See, she said, unable to keep the triumph from her voice. I told you I paid for it. Derek examined the receipt, his expression unreadable. It says cash, he finally said. You paid in cash? Michelle frowned. No, I used my card. Then why does the receipt say cash? Derek held it out for her to see. Sure enough, the word cash was printed at the bottom, along with the amount, $48.50. I don't know, Michelle said, taking the receipt from him. There must have been some mix-up. The cashier was distracted with that phone call. Maybe he rang it up wrong. Derek took the receipt back, studying it as if it held some deeper truth. Or maybe, he said slowly, this isn't your receipt at all. Maybe it belongs to someone else who actually paid for their cake. The implication hung in the air between them. Michelle felt her cheeks grow hot. Are you serious right now? You still think I stole the cake? I don't know what to think, Derek replied, setting the receipt down on the table. You say you paid with a card, but the receipt says cash. You can't remember the actual transaction. It doesn't add up, Michelle. What doesn't add up is why you're so determined to make me the bad guy here. Michelle shot back. Why can't you just believe me? Why is your first instinct to assume I did something wrong? Derek ran a hand through his hair again, a gesture that now irritated Michelle instead of endearing her. Because the evidence suggests— The evidence? Michelle cut in. This isn't a courtroom, Derek, it's our anniversary. And instead of celebrating 5 years together, you're cross-examining me over a cake. A cake you might have stolen, Derek said, his voice rising slightly. I did not steal anything. Michelle's patience snapped. I had my card out. The cashier got distracted. There was a mix-up with the payment. It happens. Why is that so hard for you to accept? Because it keeps happening, Derek countered. The paint samples, the coffee, the electric bill, those were completely different situations. Michelle's voice was louder now, too. Their neighbors could probably hear them, but she didn't care. And I fixed all of those mistakes. Just like I'll fix this one if it turns out I didn't pay. Derek shook his head. It's not about fixing it afterward. It's about being responsible in the first place. It's about care and attention. Oh, and you're so perfect? Michelle asked, her anger building. You never make mistakes? Not like this, Derek said firmly. Not repeatedly. Michelle laughed, but there was no humor in it. Really? What about the time you forgot to renew your license and got that ticket? Or when you missed the reservation for our anniversary dinner last year because you wrote down the wrong date? Those were honest mistakes, Derek defended. And mine aren't? Michelle challenged. Why do you get the benefit of the doubt, but I don't? Derek didn't answer right away. He turned away from Michelle, bracing his hands on the kitchen counter. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter but no less intense. My mistakes don't cost us money we don't need to spend. Michelle felt as if she'd been slapped. So that's what this is really about, she said slowly. Money. Derek turned back to face her. It's about responsibility. Financial responsibility. Which you think I lack, Michelle finished for him. Because of my family. Because my brother went through a bankruptcy after his ex-wife ran up credit card debt in his name. Because my dad struggled with gambling 20 years ago. I didn't say that, Derek protested, but his expression told Michelle she'd hit the mark. You didn't have to, she said. It's obvious what you think of me, of my family. Derek's jaw tightened. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm just connecting the dots you've laid out, Michelle replied. My family has money issues, so naturally I must too. I'm just an irresponsible person who can't be trusted to pay for a cake. That's not what I said, Derek insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Michelle crossed her arms. Then what are you saying, Derek? Explain it to me. Derek hesitated, clearly struggling to find the right words. I'm saying that patterns exist for a reason, that behaviors are learned, that sometimes we don't see our own blind spots. And you think my blind spot is being careless with money? Michelle asked. Based on what? A few honest mistakes? Based on what I've observed over 5 years of marriage, Derek replied. And what I know about your family history. Michelle felt her anger rise even higher. My family history? My father has been sober and gambling-free for 15 years. He's rebuilt his life, his credit, his reputation. And you're still holding his past against him? Against me? I'm not holding anything against anyone, Derek said, his own frustration evident. I'm just stating facts. No, you're judging, Michelle corrected. You're looking down on my family, on me, because we don't meet your perfect Johnson family standards. Derek's face flushed. That's not fair, isn't it? Michelle challenged. Your family never had to struggle. Your parents paid for your college, bought you your first car, helped with the down payment on this house. You've never known what it's like to really worry about money, to have to climb back from nothing like my dad did, like my brother had to. So I'm the villain because my parents were financially stable? Derek asked incredulously. No, you're the villain because you can't see past your own privilege, Michelle snapped. Because you judge me for mistakes that any human being could make. And you connect them to my family's past struggles as if there's some kind of genetic flaw. Derek slammed his hand on the counter, making Michelle jump. I don't think it's a genetic flaw. I think it's a pattern of behavior that concerns me. As your husband, I have a right to be concerned about our finances. Our finances are fine, Michelle insisted. We both have good jobs, we pay our bills, we have savings. What exactly are you worried about? The future, Derek said. What happens when these little mistakes add up? What happens if we have kids and there are more expenses, more responsibilities? The mention of children hit Michelle hard. They'd been talking about starting a family soon. Was this what Derek really thought? That she wasn't responsible enough to be a mother? So now I'm not fit to have children? She asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Derek's eyes widened. I never said that. But it's what you meant. Michelle pressed. You don't trust me to handle money, so how could you trust me with a child? That's not, Derek began, then stopped himself. You're twisting my words. I'm hearing what you're not saying, Michelle replied. And it's pretty clear that you don't respect me or my family. Derek threw up his hands in frustration. This isn't about respect. It's about responsibility, about owning up to mistakes instead of making excuses. I have owned up to every mistake I've ever made, Michelle said fiercely. And I've fixed them. What more do you want from me? I want you to be more careful. Derek shouted. I want you to pay attention. I want you to stop acting like your family when it comes to money. There it was. The truth, finally out in the open. Michelle felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room. My family, she repeated softly. That's what this is really about, isn't it? You think I'm like them, irresponsible, untrustworthy, a financial liability. Derek didn't deny it. He stood there, breathing hard, his face flushed with anger. Michelle shook her head slowly, tears threatening to spill. 5 years, Derek, 5 years we've been married, and this is what you think of me? I think you're careless sometimes, Derek said, his voice calmer but still tense. And yes, I worry that it's a trait you learned from your family. Is that so wrong? Yes, Michelle said simply. It is wrong. Because it's not true. I am not my brother. I am not my father. I am Michelle Johnson, a woman who occasionally makes mistakes just like every other human being on this planet. Including you, Derek scoffed. My mistakes don't potentially put us in financial jeopardy. Neither do mine. Michelle cried in exasperation. What jeopardy are you talking about? A cake, a late electric bill? These are minor things, Derek. They don't define who I am. They're symptoms of a larger problem, Derek insisted. The only problem here is your inability to see me as my own person. Michelle shot back. Not as an extension of my family history. They stood facing each other across the kitchen, the cake between them on the table, the candles now burned down to stubs. The beautiful anniversary Michelle had planned was in ruins. The dress she'd bought specially for tonight felt uncomfortable and wrong. The pasta sat half-eaten in their stomachs. Nothing was as it should be. I think we should just go to bed, Derek finally said. We're not getting anywhere with this conversation. Running away when things get tough, Michelle said bitterly. Another Johnson family trait, I suppose. Derek's face darkened. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Michelle replied. Not the way you've ruined our anniversary. Not the way you've thrown my family's past in my face. Not the way you've made me feel about myself tonight. Derek's control finally snapped. With a sudden movement, he grabbed the cake box from the table. You want to talk about ruining things? He shouted. How about how you've ruined our financial trust with your carelessness? And then, before Michelle could respond, Derek did the unthinkable. He hurled the cake directly at her. Time seemed to slow as Michelle watched the white box fly toward her, the lid coming loose in midair. Red velvet and cream cheese frosting. Derek's hands dropped to his sides as the reality of what he'd just done crashed over him. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed, marking seconds that felt like hours. Cake and frosting dripped from Michelle's hair, from her new dress, the dress she'd bought specially for their anniversary. Michelle, Derek began, his voice strangled with shock at his own actions. Michelle held up a hand, stopping his words. With deliberate movements, she reached for a dish towel hanging by the sink. She wiped some of the frosting from her face, then from her hands. Her movements were slow, measured as if she were performing a ritual. The only sound was the soft scratch of the towel against her skin and the steady tick of the clock. Derek stood frozen, waiting for the explosion. The shouting, the accusations, the slam of a door. He deserved it all and more. He had crossed a line he never thought he would cross, done something unforgivable. But Michelle didn't shout. She didn't storm out. Instead, she pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down, still dabbing at the frosting on her dress. "Sit down, Derek," she said quietly. Her calmness was more unsettling than anger would have been. Derek hesitated, then slowly lowered himself into the chair across from her. Cake crumbs crunched under his feet. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with remorse. "I don't know what came over me. This isn't about the cake," Michelle interrupted, her voice still eerily calm. Derek blinked in confusion. "What?" "This isn't about the cake," she repeated, setting down the now frosting-covered dish towel. "It's not about the receipt or whether I paid or not. It's not even really about money or responsibility." "I don't understand," Derek said, though a part of him feared that he did. Michelle met his gaze directly, her dark eyes steady despite the tears that had gathered in them. "This is about trust, Derek, about respect. About how you see me and how you don't see me." Derek swallowed hard. "I do respect you, Michelle. I do trust you." She shook her head slowly, a sad smile touching her lips. "No, you don't, not really. If you respected me, you wouldn't constantly question my actions. If you trusted me, you wouldn't immediately assume the worst about something as simple as a missing receipt." "That's not fair," Derek protested weakly. "I was just concerned about a pattern I noticed." "A pattern," Michelle echoed. "Let's talk about patterns, Derek. Let's talk about how every time I make a small mistake, the kind of mistake anyone could make, you connect it to my family, to my background." Derek shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Michelle said firmly. "You meant exactly what you said. You think I'm financially irresponsible because my father had a gambling problem 20 years ago. You think I'm careless with money because my brother went through a bankruptcy after his divorce." She leaned forward slightly, her voice gaining intensity, though she still wasn't shouting. "But here's what you're not saying out loud, Derek. Here's the real pattern. You question my purchases more than your own. You check receipts when I shop, but not when you do. You make comments about budgeting after I buy new clothes, but say nothing when you upgrade your golf clubs." Derek started to speak, but Michelle continued. "And it's not just me you treat differently. You questioned my father's recovery for years, even though he's been sober longer than we've known each other. You were skeptical when my brother got back on his feet financially. You always seem surprised when my cousins talk about their professional achievements." "That's ridiculous," Derek said, but he couldn't quite meet her eyes. "Is it?" Michelle asked. "Then explain to me why you've never once doubted the financial decisions of your family. Why you never question your father's investment advice even when it doesn't pan out. Why your mother's expensive shopping habits are just treating herself, but my occasional splurges are concerning." Derek's face flushed. "That's different." "Yes," Michelle agreed. "It is different, because they're white and my family is black." The word hung in the air between them, heavy and unavoidable. They rarely spoke explicitly about race in their marriage. It was always there, of course. Michelle couldn't escape being a black woman in America, and Derek couldn't escape his whiteness either. But by unspoken agreement, they had pushed those discussions to the periphery of their relationship, focusing instead on the things they had in common. "This isn't about race," Derek said finally, his voice low. "Don't make it about that." Michelle laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. "It's always about race, Derek, even when we don't talk about it. Even when we pretend it isn't. The fact that you don't see that you can choose not to see it, is part of the problem." Derek ran a hand through his hair, leaving traces of frosting where he'd touched the table. "So now I'm racist because I was worried about a receipt?" "No," Michelle said, shaking her head. "You're not a racist, Derek, but you do have biases you've never examined. We all do. The difference is that my biases don't have the weight of centuries of stereotypes behind them." She gestured to her frosting-covered dress. "Do you think you would have thrown this cake if I were a white woman from a family like yours? If I had the Johnson name by birth instead of by marriage?" Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth was he didn't know. He wanted to say yes, that his reaction had nothing to do with race and everything to do with the specific situation, but he couldn't be certain, and that uncertainty shook him. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I'd like to think I wouldn't have thrown the cake at anyone. That's not who I am." "But it is who you were tonight," Michelle pointed out, "and I need to understand why." Derek stared at the table, at the scattered crumbs and smears of frosting. "I was frustrated," he said slowly. "I felt like you weren't taking my concerns seriously, like you were dismissing me." "I felt the same way," Michelle replied. "Like you weren't hearing me. Like you'd already decided I was wrong before I even had a chance to explain." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their failed anniversary heavy between them. "We don't talk about race enough," Michelle said eventually. "We don't talk about how it shapes the way you see me, the way you see my family. We pretend it doesn't matter, but it does." "I don't want it to matter," Derek said softly. "I want us to just be us." "But us includes my blackness and your whiteness," Michelle responded. "We can't separate those things from who we are, from how the world treats us, from how we see each other." She reached across the table, not quite touching him but extending her hand in his direction. "Do you remember when we first started dating and you told me you didn't see color?" Derek nodded, remembering his younger self's earnest declaration. "And do you remember what I said to you?" Michelle prompted. "You said—" Derek paused, recalling her words from 7 years ago. "You said that not seeing my color means not seeing all of me. That you wanted to be fully seen, not partially invisible." "Yes," Michelle said, a small smile touching her lips despite everything. "And I still want that, Derek. I want you to see all of me. My blackness, my family history, my occasional mistakes, and love me anyway. Not despite those things, but with them included." Derek felt something shift inside him, a perspective tilting like a kaleidoscope to reveal a new pattern. "I do love you," he said. "All of you." "I believe that you want to," Michelle replied. "But love without understanding is incomplete. And I don't think you've really tried to understand what it's like to be me, to have your actions constantly questioned, your mistakes magnified, your family judged by standards that other families don't have to meet." Derek was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. The kitchen around them was a disaster. Cake on the floor, frosting on the walls, the beautiful anniversary dinner ruined. But something important was happening here, something that couldn't be interrupted with cleaning or excuses or changing the subject. "I want to understand," he said finally. "I want to do better." Michelle studied his face, looking for sincerity. "Then listen," she said simply. "Really listen. Not just to my words, but to what I'm not saying, to the things that are hard for me to express because I worry you'll react. Well, like you did tonight." Derek winced at the reminder, shame washing over him again. "I promise I'll never do anything like this again," he said, gesturing to the cake-splattered kitchen. "I lost control, and that's not acceptable. Not ever." "No, it's not," Michelle agreed. "But this isn't just about the cake, Derek. It's about 5 years of small moments, small assumptions, small judgments that have been building up between us. The cake is just where it all finally spilled over." She stood up, cake still clinging to her dress. "I'm going to take a shower and change. When I come back, I think we need to have a real conversation. About race, about family, about money, about all the things we've been tiptoeing around for 5 years. Derek nodded, relief and anxiety mixing in his chest. "I'll clean up this mess," he offered, looking around at the cake-splattered kitchen. Michelle paused at the doorway. "The physical mess, yes," she said. "But the rest of it, the things between us, that's something we need to clean up together." As she left the room, Derek sat alone at the table, surrounded by the evidence of his moment of rage. He thought about what Michelle had said, about biases he'd never examined, about the way he viewed her family versus his own.